Yeah, that's our exit song.
There's a wedding program.
It's just a photocopy, like.
Oh yeah,
Is it See Nancy Corral?
No, the Haydn,
the Haydn
it's the
Corral,
Emperor,
the
the second movement.
Does it look like this?
It says variation 1, 2, and there's 3 variations.
3.
Well, that would be the second page.
This one? Yeah, I think this is the one. Yeah.
Isn't it the Poco Adagio?
2, 3. It says like.
You can play To Make You Feel My Love by Mondale.
I like that one. Maybe not that arrangement.
I'm not seeing it yet.
Maybe in the back pocket. That looks promising.
Cold Corridor album. Does everyone have this? You can do them with these.
Some of them are photo, but I don't think I have those. That's supposed to be in the hospital wedding.
I'm not playing a wedding with you tomorrow.
What?
I'm not playing a wedding with you tomorrow.
No, you and I, because it's Allie's wedding. What?
It's Allie's wedding.
It's Allie's wedding, so it's Allie and Emily.
Who plays viola?
Emily Hagan. Actually, Allie usually does duet weddings. Like, Allie usually does duets or trios. This is the first quartet I've done with her. But yeah, Emily's playing. You don't have the Haydn now. Bummer, it's so pretty. You have the other one. Leave a straw, or I thought I saw it.
Well, let's do the divertimentos then.
Yeah. The divertimentals are 23. We're starting in 23. Just do the first repeat, which is too long.
Good evening. I'd like to start our program this evening. My name is Janine Lee. I'm a graduate of the class of 1981 of the law school. I'm a shareholder at the law firm of Leonard Street and Dinard, well, at least for the time being. And I am here this evening in my capacity as chair of the Board of Advisors for the law school. The job of law school dean is never an easy one. The dean faces the Sisyphean task of recruiting the best students, retaining the very best faculty, maintaining that ever-important law school ranking, and then finding jobs for all of the graduates. Oh, and did I mention raising money? The dean must perform all these tasks under scrutiny from the sometimes competing constituencies, both inside and outside the law school. Now, imagine taking on these tasks over the last 5 years. Surely some of the most challenging in the 125-year history of the law school. That position requires a very special person. We are lucky to have one in David Webmin. The law school today boasts an exceptional student body, a top-notch faculty, and a top 20 ranking. The curriculum continues to be reshaped to maintain its place at the forefront of innovative and relevant legal education. A number of exciting initiatives like the Corporate Institute, the Public Scholar Program, the Immigration Center, are in the works or in place thanks to our foundation partners. And alumni giving is growing and helping fund the increasing need for scholarships for our students. David would be the first person to tell you that that doesn't happen without a strong team. And he has assembled just that. He gives that team and the law school as a whole the leadership needed to face the current and coming challenges. In my roles with the Board of Advisors, I get to meet students and work with faculty and alumni, many of those hard-to-please constituencies. David Webmin has impressed them all, as he has me, with his intelligence, his hard work, his vision, and his sense of humor. Please join me in welcoming Dean David Webmin.
Well, good evening and welcome everyone. Janine, thank you so much for that warm and generous introduction. You made the job sound so easy and so simple that I wonder why I find it so difficult. Well, welcome everyone to this gala celebration of the law school's 125th anniversary. It's always nice to share a special occasion with 500 of your closest friends. So thanks to all of you for coming tonight. I want to offer a special thanks to Mike Tompos and his team for all the hard work they put in organizing tonight's festivities. Thanks also to our speakers, to our table sponsors, to all the Lockhart Club and Lifetime Leadership donors who are here tonight, to all of you who have supported the law school in so many ways over the years, and recently in the course of our Generations campaign. I want to offer a particular thanks to the members of our campaign cabinet, many of who are here tonight, and especially to my high school classmate, Bruce Moody. You know, I timed this speech, so if we have applause after every line, which I appreciate, it could be a little longer than I had anticipated. But Bruce is a perfect example that I need one of those applause signs. Bruce is a perfect example of our generation's campaign theme. He's serving as our campaign chair, a role his father, John Moody, who is also here tonight, played so successfully in an earlier campaign. So my thanks to both of them. But as hard as it is for me to say this, tonight is not about fundraising. Yeah, now that should get some applause. After all, we have 364 other nights of the year for that. Tonight really is about celebrating our shared history. Tonight culminates a week of activities intended to recognize 125 years of admitting great students and graduating great lawyers. We began the week with a lecture by Intel General Counsel Doug Melamed. On Monday morning, the Department of Labor gave us permission to announce that Secretary of Labor Tom Perez would be speaking at the law school on Thursday. But on Monday night, as some of you may have heard, our government shut down. So on Tuesday, Secretary Perez was forced to postpone his trip. Senator Amy Klobuchar, who was going to join us this evening, was also forced to postpone. Well, you know, shutting down the government, putting people out of work, damaging the economy, lowering America's stature in the world, that's one thing. But messing with the law school's anniversary, that's something else. But we have soldiered on, as we always do. This afternoon, we had a dean's panel on the future of legal education. Not all of you were there. But the highlight of the week is this evening's event, with our Board of Advisors Chair, Janine Lee, Vice President Walter Mondale, and former Chief Justice of the Minnesota Supreme Court, Kathleen Blatz, as our speakers. And I promise we'll be back to them in just a minute. But first, let's go back in time to the law school's founding. The 1880s was a rough and tumble time, not so far removed from the tumult of the Civil War. Becoming a preeminent public law school was, in 1888, a very unlikely outcome. At the time, when University of Minnesota students demonstrated over receiving too many demerits, a faculty member shot one of them in the leg. And people complain about the Socratic method. Fortunately, the shooter was not a law faculty member. We, after all, are better shots. Or in any event, we know too much about the rules of liability. But many at the time were not sanguine about the prospects for a new law school here in Minnesota. The first president of the university was warned, as the Dean of Columbia Law School put it, that a new law school here would lead a miserable, dwarfish, stunted existence. So reading between the lines, I think it's fair to say he was not enthusiastic. When the regents of the university did finally agree to establish the new school, it was with a specific condition, that the new school be financially self-sufficient. Okay, not everything is different. For its first 23 years, the law school relied almost entirely on student tuition and fees. And in 1888, students were hard to come by. At that time, anyone who was over 21 could become a lawyer in Minnesota simply by taking a state examination. Indeed, Dean Pattee himself had no formal legal training. So the new law school had to prove its worth to a skeptical public. At the outset, anyone with a high school education, and by anyone I mean anyone, could get in. 32 students applied, 32 students were admitted. The good news is all 32 enrolled, so the yield was high. Even so, the combined tuition of these 30 students was less than half the dean's annual salary, a ratio which sadly no longer holds. So Dean Pattee was forced immediately to launch a night school just to break even. His mission, to educate 67 young gentlemen of zeal and promise. Now, at the time, the entire school was housed in a single room, a poorly ventilated room, in the basement of the university's main building. The library consisted exclusively of the dean's personal collection, and the dean himself did all of the teaching, with only occasional assistance from adjuncts. It was not until 1909 that the new school required 1 year of undergraduate education as a condition for admission, a requirement that was widely seen at the time as ridiculously selective, even snobbish. Enrollment promptly plummeted from 203 students to 69, and believe me, I still feel Dean Patty's pain. Undaunted, 2 years later, the law school doubled down and required 2 years of undergraduate education for admission. And standards were raised again after that. And by the 1920s, starting with Dean Vance, entering classes were greeted with the now famous "look to your left, look to your right" speech, which some of you may remember. Remarkably, the admonition that upon graduation only 1 out of 3 would remain was often literally true. But from the 20s on, the law school's history has been one of constant striving for excellence. Standards for admission have been raised again and again, and some of the country's finest teachers and scholars have come to call Minnesota home. Legends like William Prosser, Kenneth Culp Davis, Charles Allen Wright, Yael Camazar, Terry Sandilow, Arthur Miller, Stefan Riesenfeld, Jesse Choper, Elizabeth McKinnon, and Don Marshall, to name just a few. Throughout its history, the law school has pioneered many important innovations in legal education, from the 2-4 plan, which some of you were on, to the start of clinics. In short, the law school has achieved its present status as one of the country's preeminent public law schools the old-fashioned way. We earned it. Over the past 125 years, some 18,000 lawyers earned their degrees here at Minnesota. 17,610 JDs and bachelors, 747 masters, and 3 doctors of civil law. But who's counting? The reality is, our alumni, all of you, have over the years promoted the rule of law and shaped both Minnesota and the nation in countless ways, large and small. As lawyers, as managing partners, as prosecutors and public defenders, as entrepreneurs and governors and members of Congress, ambassadors, leaders of companies like DuPont and Honeywell, nonprofit heads, judges and justices, and even a Vice President of the United States. It's not by accident that Professor and former Dean Bob Stein, who is here tonight, titled his History of the Law School, "In Pursuit of Excellence." Today, we educate some 850 young men and women of zeal and promise. We have 60 full-time faculty, 200 adjuncts, 25 clinics, a library with over 1 million volumes, and in Mondale Hall, a large and adequately ventilated home. Nothing has changed, and everything has changed. Given how far we've come, I am tempted to put up a large banner proclaiming "Mission accomplished." But that hasn't always worked out so well. Besides, the law school has achieved its successes not by looking to the past, but by always looking to the future. With your help, I'm sure we can make the next 125 years as full of promise and accomplishment as the last 125. It's now my pleasure and great privilege to introduce our next speaker. Of course, if anyone in Minnesota doesn't need an introduction, especially to this audience, it would be Walter Mondale. After all, his name is on our building. His portrait hangs in our lobby. The students affectionately refer to the portrait as the Mondale Lisa. They claim that the eyes follow you wherever you go. This is actually true. The portrait was hung by the NSA. Now, because you all know him so well, I'm going to keep my introduction to one sentence. Here it is. Korean War veteran, law school graduate, class of 1956, lawyer, Minnesota Attorney General, Senator, Vice President of the United States, Ambassador to Japan, statesman, diplomat, author, and most important, member of the law school's 2008 Dean Search Committee. Walter Mondale personifies our theme of lawyers shaping the law to benefit society. He's someone who understands the importance of government and keeping government open and coming to the law school's 125th anniversary, not necessarily in that order. I know that sounded like 2 sentences, but I used a semicolon, so it's all good. Please join me in welcoming Vice President Walter Mondale.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dean Webmin, for that kind introduction, for your inspired leadership of our wonderful law school. I did serve on that Dean Selection Committee, and many of us still feel good about it. I want to honor the many distinguished guests. We're all distinguished. Chief Federal Judge Davis, Chief Justice Gilday, judges and justices that are found throughout this room, President Kaler, Don and Armand Fraser, County Attorney Mike Freeman, Secretary of State Mark Ritchie, our gifted faculty, students, and friends. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm honored to be with you. Going to this law school was one of the best things that ever happened to me in my life, and I'm always thrilled to be involved in its activities. We are here tonight to celebrate a truly wonderful and historic event, the 125th anniversary of our wonderful law school. And we rejoice in what this great school has done for its graduates, but even more for what our graduates have done and are doing for the cause of justice and decency, not just in Minnesota, but across the country and the world. Under Dean Webmin's inspired leadership, our faculty is stronger than ever before. Our students benefit from a wonderful education, and they will be superb lawyers. Our law school, for those of us in this room, and I think you could agree with me, has opened up our lives to what someone has called the privilege of service. And it is a privilege to be able to serve. Kathleen Blatz, who will soon be speaking, is a very good example of what we're talking about, as are tonight's honorees who will soon be recognized. In fact, this room is packed with graduates who are serving others. Our students have many opportunities to experience that privilege of service. The Dean has talked about the wonderful things the law school are doing. I would like to talk about one example that really excites me, and that is the clinic program that the law school has. Cases that have gone through the clinic program bring aid to clients with limited means of obtaining legal support and significant benefits for a larger community. Students participating in the clinics have provided more than 10,000 hours of pro bono legal services to the Twin Cities community each year. Students also participate in coursework, externships, law journals, and other programs focused on serving the public interest. But as we all know, public service takes many forms. As lawyers and officers of the court, we are heirs to the profession Americans hold most responsible for protecting our precious system of freedom and justice. And the rich history of the role of lawyers in our society began as our founders were forming our nation. During the colonial period, our courts were seen as representing the interests of the crown. But with nationhood, our Supreme Court and the federal courts system quickly became the arbiter of the Constitution and the law, greatly strengthening the growth and stability of our new nation. Alex de Tocqueville recognized in his historic writings that lawyers are democracy's best security against the arbitrary exercise of government. And just as our founders brilliantly laid the foundation of national strength through law, so too today, our students must be trained and encouraged to have the vision and the courage to deal with today's profound challenges. And I'm glad to say that the talented faculty at our University Law School are already rising and have risen to this task. Many of you, I don't know, were here 25 years ago at our centennial, but our speaker was Mike Sovereign. Mike was one of my professors when I went to law school. He later became the Dean of Columbia Law School and then President of Columbia University. He also played Ronald Reagan when I was preparing to debate Reagan. And I always tell Mike that's one of the reasons I didn't do very well. In his wonderful speech at our centennial, he reminded us of this, that the most important goal of a great faculty is the unencumbered acceptance of this responsibility to lead to the good. It is, he said, the key to great teaching and inspired learning. We know that lawyers must yet lead our country toward the good. It's an unfinished task. It's always needed. Wherever we are, on the bench, in public office, at the lectern, corporate headquarters, private practice, wherever, justice must be our cause. And thanks to our wonderful University of Minnesota Law School, that is exactly what we are doing. So on this great occasion of our law school's 125th, would you please rise and join me in a toast? And somebody give me something to toast with. I appreciate it. Here, I got it. Thank you, Dean, for making it. To the University of Minnesota Law School and its graduates, partners in advancing the rule of law. Salute. Now it is my privilege to douse our next speaker in water. It's now my privilege to introduce former Chief Justice Kathleen Blatz, who will be tonight's Master of Ceremonies. She's a great example of what our law school is all about. A wonderful legislator, and an admired leader there, an Associate Justice, and then our wonderful Chief Justice of our Supreme Court. Since then, Kathleen remains an admired civic leader and enjoys enormous public respect, and it shows every day in our state, and we're glad to have you with us tonight. So please join me in welcoming our friend and former Chief Justice, Kathleen Blatz.
Thank you, Vice President Mondale. You are truly one of Minnesota's greatest statesmen, and a role model for, I think, everybody in this room, and we are so proud to call you one of our own. Thank you so much. It's great to be here tonight. I understand from Dean Whitman that this is a sold-out event, and what a great event to celebrate our birthday, 125 years at the law school. Dean Whitman, thank you for your great leadership at the law school and for pulling together this party tonight to celebrate our law school's rich history. And in truth, with 125 years behind us, there's simply too much ground to cover in one night. So instead, we are going to celebrate the fact that our law school continues to be a national leader in educating and preparing lawyers to make positive differences, not only in our state, but our nation and the world. Tonight, we are going to honor all graduates by focusing in on 11 different contributions made by our alumni. To arrive at the 11, all alumni, faculty, and staff were asked to make recommendations or nominations of people they thought, obviously, who graduated from our law school, who made a difference in the world. More than 150 nominations were received. In reducing that number, the goal was to select graduates whose stories reflected the breadth and depth of alumni accomplishments. The 11 stories that will be shared tonight demonstrate how alumni have shaped the rule of law in such diverse areas as international relations and national security, corporate governance and responsibility, government service and public impact work, as well as individuals involved with seminal cases that changed the arc of the law. And finally, alumni with pioneering personal stories that paved the way for others in our profession. In order to capture the breadth of work and life accomplishments, the law school decided not to recognize, at this time, alumni whose contributions were made principally as elected officials, law school faculty, or judges. So that means slackers like Vice President Mondale, Governor Wendell Anderson, Attorney General Warren Spanis, who is with us tonight, will not be recognized, at least on this list. Instead, their ilk will be honored later this year in separate and more focused ways. So tonight, our focus is not only on exceptional alumni, it is also on the wide range of contributions that have been made. To help showcase this diverse group of outstanding alumni are two current, very impressive students. Anna Mazig, who is the Law Council President, and Jake Vanderlist, who is the Editor-in-Chief of Volume 98 of the Minnesota Law Review. Both Anna and Jake are 3Ls, and please join me in giving them a warm welcome.
The Honorable Charles Flynn, class of 1965. The Honorable Edward Cleary, class of 1977. Michael Cromit, class of 1978. Alan Sakes, class of 1956. And Thomas Foley, class of 1972. In 1992, the U.S. Supreme Court decided R.I.V. versus City of St. Paul, a landmark First Amendment case that began with the burning of a cross on the lawn of an African-American family in St. Paul. The case has become important nationally because of its impact on free speech, but it is also notable because of the 4 attorneys appearing before the United States Supreme Court, as well as the Honorable Charles Flynn, who heard the case initially in Ramsey County, were all University of Minnesota Law School alumni. The Honorable Edward Cleary and Michael Cromit argued the St. Paul bias-motivated crime ordinance violated the First Amendment. As Ramsey County Attorney, Thomas Foley represented the City of St. Paul because the defendant, RAV, was a juvenile. Alan Sakes, along with many others, submitted an amicus brief supporting St. Paul's position on the ordinance, which was intended to combat hate crimes. This case sparked a national debate about the balance between two important goals: protecting free speech, even when it is harmful, and protecting those who may be harmed by it. In a case that continues to shape the application and interpretation of the First Amendment, the court concluded, "Let there be no mistake about our belief that burning a cross in someone's front yard is reprehensible, but St. Paul has a sufficient means at its disposal to prevent such behavior without adding the First Amendment to the fire."
Honorable Orville Freeman, class of 1946, and Michael Freeman, class of 1974. Orville Freeman was elected governor of Minnesota 3 times in the 1950s and then went on to serve as the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture under Presidents Kennedy and Johnson. Freeman was instrumental in developing the U.S. Food Stamp Program, now known as the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP. In the 1960s, many Americans went hungry despite significant farm surpluses. Freeman developed a solution to supply food to those in need through a demonstration food stamp program administered by the USDA. He persuaded Congress to accept the pilot program, which required no new appropriation and utilized existing food distribution systems. In 1964, Freeman combined the food stamp program with other farm programs to produce a coherent national food and agriculture policy that continues to this day. Last year alone, SNAP helped feed over 48 million Americans in need. Orville Freeman's son, Michael Freeman, is a second-generation graduate of the University of Minnesota Law School, who has also chosen a life of public service. He currently serves as Hennepin County Attorney and in 1993 argued before the U.S. Supreme Court in Minnesota v. Dickerson, a precedent-setting criminal procedure case that established the in plain touch concept in police searches involving weapons, drugs, and other concealed contraband. The Freemans are a great example of the diverse accomplishments of a University of Minnesota Law School family.
Kathy Hockadal, class of 1979. In 2011, Kathy Hockadal was named Executive Director of Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid after serving 9 years as the organization's Deputy Director for Minneapolis. She is the first woman to serve as the Director of Legal Aid in its 100-year history. Although the past few years have been challenging for Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid because of increased demand and decreased funding, the organization, under Ms. Hockadal's leadership, has maintained its ability to provide high-quality legal services to low-income clients. In 2012, Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid provided services to over 10,000 Minnesotans in the areas of family law, immigration, housing, and disability services, among others. Legal Aid has been a key partner in innovative programs like the Stearns County Domestic Violence Partnership, which brought together attorneys, law enforcement, mental health providers, and other partners to reduce rates of domestic violence in the St. Cloud area, keeping families safe. According to Ms. Hockadal, her heart has always been in public interest work. She participated in the clinical program as a student at the law school and believes this opportunity enhanced the legal education she received. Her commitment to public service continued during her time with the Minnesota Attorney General's office from 1979 to 1995, where she was the first female Solicitor General. Ms. Hockadal was in private practice from 1995 to 2002 at the Fellhaber Law Firm. During that time, she continued to serve on numerous volunteer opportunities, many of which work towards providing access to justice. Ms. Hockadal is proud to be a leader of attorneys and staff at Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid as they work tirelessly to provide legal services to those in need.
Professor Joyce Ann Hughes, class of 1965. When she started at the law school, Joyce Ann Hughes was one of 10 women in her class. By graduation, she was one of only 4 women who had finished and the first Black female to have earned a Juris Doctorate degree. She knew that being both an African American and female student would expose her to racism and sexism, but from a young age, she had never been dissuaded from achieving her goals. Her parents believed strongly in the importance of education and moved Professor Hughes and her older sister from Alabama to Minnesota because they would be able to access public schools with greater resources. Professor Hughes' parents left the warm weather of Alabama, as well as all family and friends, when they traveled straight north to cold Minnesota. She believes their pioneering spirit contributed to her success. After graduation, she clerked for the Honorable Earl R. Larson. She was the first African American, as well as the first female, to clerk for a federal district court judge in Minnesota. Although she faced adversity, both personally and professionally, Professor Hughes persevered and became the first African-American tenure-track professor at a major law school when she joined the University of Minnesota Law School faculty in 1971. Professor Hughes credits Dean William Lockhart with advocating for her appointment to the faculty and for supporting her during her early years at the law school. Today, she is a professor at Northwestern School of Law in Chicago, where she both shares her legal expertise and her life experience with her students.
Arnie Sorensen, class of 1983. As the current president and CEO of Marriott International and the first non-Marriott family member to serve in this role, Arnie Sorensen is committed not only to his organization's success, but also to ensuring that diversity and corporate responsibility are valued within Marriott. In addition to his executive responsibilities, Mr. Sorensen is chairman of Marriott's Global Diversity and Inclusion Council, which monitors and evaluates progress towards increased diversity within the Marriott workforce and within its network of suppliers and business partners. He co-founded Marriott's Global Sustainability Council in 2007, and in 2008 launched Marriott's Rainforest Preservation Partnership with the Amazonas Sustainable Foundation in Brazil. In late September, President Obama named Mr. Sorensen to the President's Export Council, which is the principal national advisory committee on international trade. In this role, Mr. Sorensen will serve as advisor to the President on government policies and programs that affect U.S. trade performance and will resolve trade-related issues among the business, agricultural, labor, and government sectors. Mr. Sorensen's legal training and his business acumen give him problem-solving skills that are recognized around the world.
The Minnesota Justice Foundation. Since 1982, the Minnesota Justice Foundation has connected volunteer law students and attorneys with low-income people in need of legal services. This innovative organization was founded by a group of University of Minnesota Law School students who felt strongly about helping their peers find opportunities to serve the public good. MJF started out with 6 summer clerkships, and through partnerships with nonprofits, law firms, and other organizations, the impact of MJF has grown tremendously. The class of 2013, during their time at the law school, has carried on the tradition of founders Robert Long, class of 1985, Richard Plunkett, class of 1984, Michael Christensen, class of 1984, Artis Korstad, class of 1984, and Michael Kraus, class of 1984, by providing nearly 25,000 hours of volunteer legal service to over 8,700 low-income clients. The origin of the name Minnesota Justice Foundation not only reflects the organization's commitment to serving those in need of access to justice, but also the founders' belief that education, specifically a legal education, provides a strong foundation for individuals to pursue a path of service. The University of Minnesota Law School is proud to continue to be the home of MJF and to sustain its founders' philosophy of addressing the legal needs of the community.
Jeanette Bezos, class of 1992, and Michael Ponto, class of 1989. Although they represented opposing sides in the federal lawsuit challenging the Anoka-Hennepin School District's response to allegations of bullying of LGBT and gender nonconforming students, Jeanette Bezos and Michael Ponto drew on their problem-solving skills and ability to collaborate to reach a solution with positive outcomes. In 2011, Mr. Ponto brought a lawsuit on behalf of 5 LGBT and gender nonconforming students to address reported widespread bullying in the district. The Departments of Justice and Education through the U.S. Attorney's Office also played a crucial role in the negotiations and ultimately filed their own complaint in intervention, largely mirroring and somewhat expanding upon the allegations of the student plaintiffs. Another U of M Law School alumni, Greg Booker, class of 1985, from the U.S. Attorney's Office participated throughout the process as well. In 2012, the district, the government, and the plaintiffs reached a settlement which included a consent decree strengthening the district's programs and training aimed at preventing and eliminating harassment of LGBT students and measuring the effectiveness of those efforts. As a result, students in the Anoka-Hennepin School District report a healthier and more peaceful environment in their individual schools. Mr. Ponto credits excellent university faculty, including Irving Younger and Judith Younger, among others, who taught him the nobility of the legal profession and thus helped inspire him to be a lawyer who makes a difference in the world. The Minnesota Justice Foundation provided Mr. Ponto with his earliest pro bono opportunities and showed him the value and necessity of pro bono legal services. Ms. Bezos praises the collaborative spirit of her law school professors and her class of 1992, and extends that spirit of problem solving in her current work, including the Anoka-Hennepin School District matter. She now mentors young attorneys to sustain this philosophy for the next generation. Both of these U of M alumni show that collaboration, even in our adversarial legal system, can bring about positive change in our communities.
Michael Cerisi, class of 1971, Roberta Walburn, class of 1983, and Hubert H. Humphrey III, class of 1969. For decades, the tobacco industry had been able to deflect all lawsuits brought against it until Michael Cerisi, Roberta Walburn, and Hubert H. Skip Humphrey III pursued an aggressive strategy to hold tobacco companies accountable. Mr. Humphrey was Minnesota Attorney General at the time, and he hired Mr. Cerisi and Ms. Walburn to pursue the case on behalf of the state of Minnesota. In the words of Mr. Cerisi, this was a true partnership, and all of the attorneys involved worked together effectively to reach their common goal. The team was under great pressure to settle early, but chose instead to persevere, ultimately prevailing in this landmark case. In addition to reaching a favorable and record-setting settlement in the state of Minnesota v. Philip Morris, the attorneys involved helped shed light on an important public health issue. As a result of the litigation, more than 35 million pages of internal documents from the tobacco industry were uncovered and put into repositories, where they continue to shape public policy and health initiatives across the globe. All 3 of the University of Minnesota attorneys leading this case credit their law school experience with instilling in them a willingness to face adversity and a resolve to find creative ways to apply the law in the service of the larger good in society.
James Hale, class of 1965. Well known for his role as general counsel at Target, James Hale headed a legal team that defended a hostile takeover attempt in 1987. At Target, he focused on business conduct issues and on increasing the organization's corporate philanthropy. He also worked to develop standards for labor conditions at Target's vendors and suppliers. Throughout his career, Mr. Hale has been a champion of ethical corporate governance and has shared his knowledge and experience with those in corporate leadership positions. Mr. Hale also made a mark on case law when earlier in his legal career, he made a critical contribution to a monumental Supreme Court decision. As Chief Justice Earl Warren's clerk, he played a key part in drafting the majority opinion in Miranda v. Arizona. This incredible opportunity for Mr. Hale drew on important skills that he developed at the U of M Law School, the capacity to think critically and to consider all facets of an argument. In addition, Mr. Hale is committed to providing legal assistance to the disadvantaged, as is evidenced by his role as founding chairman of the Fund for the Legal Aid Society. Tonight, we honor Mr. Hale's contributions to the corporate community and to precedent-setting case law.
Michael Hurley, class of 1980. Michael Hurley is currently the president of Team 3I LLC, an international strategy company. He also remains an advisor to the co-chairs of the 9/11 Commission and their Homeland Security Project at the Bipartisan Policy Center. Mr. Hurley directed the 9/11 Commission's counterterrorism policy investigation and co-authored its best-selling final report. He retired after 25 years in the CIA, where he was a senior operations officer and manager, serving more than 15 years in high-profile foreign countries. Immediately after the 9/11 attacks on the United States, he deployed for 18 months to Afghanistan, where he played a key role in Operation Anaconda, the biggest campaign of the Afghan conflict, and was a leader in the hunt for Osama bin Laden. Mr. Hurley credits his time at the University of Minnesota Law School for helping him develop the skills necessary to serve his country so effectively, including the ability to see all sides of an issue, to appreciate the importance of detail, and to write clearly and persuasively. He has reminded and remained connected to Professor Fred Morrison and continues to seek out his insight and advice. Mr. Hurley is a strong example of one of our alumni who has used the skills he learned in law school in a way that has shaped events around the world and brought critical analysis to some of the most difficult problems of our generation.
Constance Barry Newman, class of 1959. Constance Barry Newman has spent a large part of her career working to bring humanitarian and economic aid to developing countries. Her commitment to public service was shaped by her time growing up in the South, where civil rights issues and concerns were always present, and by her father's service as a leader on the national board of the NAACP. Miss Newman was only one of 3 women in her law school class, and still credits Dean Lockhart with being instrumental in her decision to attend the University of Minnesota Law School. After graduation, Miss Newman faced obstacles to finding employment because of her race and gender. Despite her educational achievements, the only job she could find after finishing school was as a clerk typist at the U.S. Department of Interior. Miss Newman worked her way up the ranks in the federal government, and by 1971, she received her first of 7 presidential appointments when she was named director of the Vista Service Program by President Nixon. Her public service continues to this day. In her career, she has represented the U.S. at the G8 Summit for 4 years, worked extensively with the World Bank and African nations, and served as the Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs from 2004 to 2005. She also served on the board of the International Republican Institute, where she was charged with the observance of the rule of law in Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Ukraine, El Salvador, and 39 African nations. Ms. Newman is currently the Special Counsel for African Affairs at the Carmen Group in Washington, D.C., where she continues to advocate for the nations of that continent.
Thank you, Jake and Anna, for that great presentation. We are fortunate tonight to have some of the honorees here present, and I'm going to call out the names of the people that I know are here, and if I apologize in advance, and I want to be corrected if I omit anybody. I'm going to ask them to stand up, have everybody hold their applause until everybody has had a chance to be recognized. Jeanette Bezos. Judge Edward Cleary. Please stand. Michael Crommett. Tom Foley. Mike Freeman. Jim Hale. Kathy Hockadal. Ike Ponto. Alan Sakes. Mike Cerisi. Roberta Walburn. And anybody else that I might have forgotten here? Let's Well done. You represent us so well. My final privilege tonight is to introduce to you the President of the University of Minnesota. President Eric Hale is a 1982 graduate of the University of Minnesota with a PhD in chemical engineering. His specialty was complex fluids. Let me translate that. That does not mean something more complicated than beer or wine, like a Cosmo or a martini. In engineering terms, complex fluids have applications in drug delivery, food processing, pharmaceuticals, and manufacturing. President Hale received many recognitions in his life, including being elected to the National Academy of Engineering and being appointed to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security Academic Advisory Council. This year, he was named a Charter Fellow of the National Academy of Inventors. Now in his third year as president, Eric Hale continues to be focused on core priorities, which include academic excellence, access for qualified students, stewardship of tuition and public dollars, world-class research, and importantly, a Gopher win tomorrow against University of Michigan. While President Hale and his wonderful wife, Karen, they bleed maroon and gold, I don't want us to forget something. He's not totally like us. He is an engineer. He is not a lawyer. And because you are a non-lawyer, President Hale, we do not take your presence or your support of the law school for granted. We know that as a general rule, non-lawyers do not appreciate lawyers. I know that we're in mixed company, and my statements might make some of you uncomfortable, and I keep thinking of what my mother used to tell me: don't talk about religion, don't talk about politics, and don't talk about the underappreciation of lawyers in public. But a fact is a fact, and the fact that lawyers are unappreciated is a very old fact. And I have evidence in my hand to prove it. What I have is an actual quote from a census report that was made by the county clerk of Grafton County, where Dartmouth, I believe, is, in New Hampshire. And he made the report in 1770, 6 years before we even became a country. And he made it to none other than His Royal Highness George III. And the report goes as follows: Noble Sire, I have the pleasure to report as follows. Grafton County, New Hampshire consists of 1,249 square miles and contains 6,429 souls. Most are engaged in agriculture, but among the others we have 67 carpenters, 49 wheelwrights, 87 ministers of the Lord, 11 doctors, 20 slaves, and 90 students at the new college, and not one lawyer, for which blessed and happy state we take no personal credit, but thank an almighty and merciful God. I'm sad to tell you that is a true census report. So President Hale, given our long-suffering history, we are so grateful to you for being here tonight with Karen to celebrate our 125th anniversary. Join me in giving him a very warm Minnesota welcome.
Thank you, Justice Blatz. There for a minute, I thought we were going to make it through the evening without a lawyer joke, but you got an oldie but goodie there, which is wonderful. Mr. Mondale, thank you so much. You honor us by your presence here. You're a tremendous citizen of the state of Minnesota. It's my honor to know you. Thank you for being with us. Ladies and gentlemen and friends of the law school, as has been abundantly illustrated, I'm not a lawyer, and so I'm a little bit nervous about making my first closing statement in front of such a demanding and knowledgeable jury. Fortunately, there's no reasonable doubt, and the summation can be simple, direct, and brief. All of the evidence tonight is proven, and all of the expert witnesses have told us that we have an exceptional, world-class law school. And on behalf of the entire University of Minnesota community, let me express my deepest pride in the law school alumni, our faculty, our staff, our donors, and especially our students, the future leaders of this state, this nation, and this world, and especially modeled by Jake and Anna tonight. The school's accomplishments and that of its alumni are really remarkable, and we're proudly celebrating 125 years of truly extraordinary contributions and accomplishments. But as always, and at a university we do this all the time, we point not to the past and remember, but to the future and hope. And the hope for the future is engaged in the students of the Law School of the University of Minnesota. And if you are a student, 1, 2, 3L, or otherwise, would you please stand up for me? These young people are why we're here. It's why we do what we do every day, and they represent great hope and great promise. We have great enthusiasm about your future, but I remind you that you will stand on the shoulders of the legal scholars who've come before you, of the great practitioners of law who have paved the way to where we are today. We trust you to carry us to even greater success, greater prosperity, and a greater world for all of us. Thank you for being here this evening. Thank you to our donors for your generosity, your investment in us. We work hard to make sure that you feel that investment is worthwhile. Dean Whitman, thank you for your leadership. You're excellent, and in fact, it turns out you are the funny one. Thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your evening and make your way home safely. Thank you for being with us.